Hello everybody, today we're going to show you the mummy of Cleopatra for the first time in history. She was the last pharaoh of Egypt during the Ptolemaic period, and she reigned in the year 51 BC to 30 BC. We also have the mummy of Set, whose real name is Ashe. Set was the one who murdered his brother Osiris, so we also have his mummy as well. Also, we revisit Ptolemy the First Sota from our previous episode, who is messing with God part 1, where we actually identified his mummy. But what happened in that episode is we missed certain information out, so we're about to present you with those information today. Also, for the first time in history, we actually present to you who actually deciphered the hieroglyph. This is one of the best kept secrets. Even Egyptologists will be quite surprised with this information that we have today. Also, in this episode, we actually show you how to actually read the hieroglyph itself, and we present some examples with words as well. Then we revisit the first 6 pharaohs of the first dynasty of Egypt. So we give you their proper name from the first to the 6th pharaoh of the first dynasty of Egypt. Also, in this video, we have not used any computer generated softwares like other YouTube channels have been doing to try and make the original black pharaohs look white or Asian or Arab. So we've done none of that. Also, we have not gone to Egypt and painted the original looking black people as white. We've done none of that. We've not hacked out any of their noses like Egyptologists have been doing for decades. We've actually presented the ancient Egyptians exactly as they look in this video. So really, in this video, we really go in. Now, welcome back to Dark Matter 1801. Today's episode is Who is Messing with God Part 2. So please stay tuned. So we begin with Ptolemy V, who reigned in the year 204 BC to 108 BC. He was the 5th king during the Ptolemaic period, and he was the one who made the Rosetta stone. On the left hand side you can see him, this is him here, and then on the right hand side is the Rosetta stone. At the top of the Rosetta stone is the hieroglyphs itself, the ancient Egyptian language. In the middle is the Demotic language, and at the far end is Greek. So he was the one who made the Rosetta Stone in the year 196 BC. Since we're still within the Ptolemaic period, I'll just briefly like to introduce Ptolemy the First Sota, because what happened in our previous episode is we missed out some really key information which I'd like to bring in today. So this is Ptolemy the First Sota, the first Greek Macedonian ruler of Egypt. His period of reign was between 305 BC and 285 BC. On the left hand side is his mummy, and on the right hand side is his bust. We identified that in our previous episode. Now, there's certain key information that I want you guys to be aware of. If you look at the left side of his ears, they're exactly the same as the mummy. If you look at his hair, he's almost going bald. It's exactly the same like on the right of the bust. The nose are exactly the same. Now, what we missed out in the previous episode that we'd like to highlight in this episode is that if you look at the left hand side, you can actually see his high cheek. He's got a high cheekbone. He's got high cheekbone, which is exactly the same as the bust on the right hand side. The nose are exactly the same. Then also, if you look at his right eye, the right eyebrow, they're exactly the same. Ptolemy has a right eyebrow, which is exactly the same as his bust as well. Now, his mouth is closed, like we mentioned previously. That's because the bust mouth is closed, but his mummy's mouth is open. That's because, that's how he died, basically. The chin are exactly the same. They have a long chin. But I want you to take a note of his right ears, you see that Ptolemy's right ear is missing. Now I'll tell you exactly how how his right ear got missing. There was a war in which he lost in 306 BC. He lost that battle. It was a sea battle, actually, in Cyprus. Ptolemy's brother got killed. Ptolemy was captured. His right ear was cut off, but he managed to escape. That is how his right ear is missing. So if you look at the right ear, he hasn't got a right ear. It's missing. It's been cut off, and the bust also does not have a right ear. And this is one of the key issues that we want to bring out in this period. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is Ptolemy the First Soter. This is him. This is his mummy. On the left-hand side is him, and on the right-hand side is his bust. 100% this is Ptolemy the First Soter. What Egyptologists have done is they've actually moved him from his resting place in Alexander, and then they've placed him into the 8th pharaoh of the 18th dynasty, whose name is Thutmose I, but actual real name is Utitut-Moshe. So that's exactly what they've done. In fact, they've actually disrespected him. So he would have never wanted his mummy to be moved from Alexander and then moved to the 18th dynasty and then been displayed as Ptolemy I. So his mummy as well has been disrespected. So yes, this is his mummy. So who they've been displaying as Ptolemy the First Soter is not actually Ptolemy the First Soter. This is the real pharaoh who is the 8th king of the 18th dynasty. We identified him in our previous episode. His name is Utitut-Moshe, not Thutmose the fourth, as you're led to believe. His name is Utitut-Moshe. Utitut means truth, and Moshe means thank you. And he's the one who actually head is that of the Sphinx. As you can see on the left-hand side, that's Utitut-Moshe. In the middle, that's how the Sphinx look, and then on the right you got a side impression of it. Then we go on to Cleopatra the 7th. She reigned in the year 51 BC to 30 BC. As you can see quite clearly, on the left hand side is Cleopatra, that's her coins. And then on the right hand side, ladies and gentlemen, for the first time in history, this is Cleopatra's mummy. Because if you look at the right cheek, you can actually see her right cheek is swollen. And you can also see the snake bites on the right cheek. In fact, she was actually bitten twice. So not only was she bitten on the right side of her cheek, she was also bitten near her nose. So this is the mummy of Cleopatra the 7th. This is her mummy. Just like how they moved Ptolemy the First Soter's mummy from Alexander into a Black Pharaoh's dynasty, that's exactly the same thing that they've done to Cleopatra as well. This is Cleopatra's mummy. This is her here. 100% this is Cleopatra. Then you can look again on the left hand side. This is exactly how a snake bite will look like. This is a snake bite ad actually. So you can see how a snake bite actually looks with the with his right cheek, or his left cheek rather, swollen. And then you have on the right hand side, you have Mac snake bite. You can see Mac on the left hand side holding the snake playing, but the snake bit him. And then on the right, you can actually see his face swollen. Then also you can see on the left hand side exactly how a snake bite would look like. And then on the right hand side, we have the mummy of Cleopatra the 7th. Right at the top of that swollen cheek, you can still see the snake bite. This is Cleopatra the 7th. In fact, with that same chin, distinct chin that the Ptolemy have. Then again here, you can actually see this stela is from the Ptolemaic period, the end period of the Ptolemaic reign. So on the left hand side, they say this is Cleopatra the 7th. She's got a double crown, but why would Cleopatra, a queen, be wearing a double crown? She's not ruling over Upper Egypt or Lower Egypt, but here they're saying that she's paying a homage to Isis, whose real name was actually Isin. So How can she be paying homage to Isis when Isis herself hasn't actually got a double crown on? So you can see, and then at the bottom of it, it's got Greek letters. So this demonstrates to us that the Greeks are not ancient Egyptian and the ancient Egyptians are not Greek. That stela is written in Greek language. If they could speak the ancient Egyptian language, they would have had hieroglyphs at the bottom of it. So most of the Ptolemy mummies have actually been found. What Egyptologists did was they've actually moved most of those Ptolemy mummies from Alexander. They've then moved them into various black Egyptian dynasties. That is exactly what Egyptologists did. Now, this brings us to the question, who actually deciphered the hieroglyphs? On the right hand side, we have Jean Champollion. He was born in 1790 and he died in 1833. As you can see him here, this is the only picture that we have of him. This is the only picture that survives of Jean Champollion. It is believed that Jean Champollion was the one who deciphered the hieroglyphs. It is said he attended an Oriental school in Paris. However, Egyptologists have been very deceptive. So the idea is he might not even have existed in the first place. Also, there is no evidence whatsoever that Jean Champollion can speak the Yoruba language. There's absolutely no evidence whatsoever that he can speak the Yoruba language, because the only person who could have deciphered the hieroglyph would have had a good knowledge of Yoruba, because Yoruba and the ancient Egyptian language are the same. And we're going to demonstrate that for you today. So no, Jean Champollion did not decipher the hieroglyphs. Ladies and gentlemen, this is who deciphered the hieroglyphs. Samuel Ajayi Crowther, born in Oyo State, Nigeria in 1809. A linguist and a clergyman, wrote and spoke the Greek and Roman language, the first Black African Anglican Church bishop. He also was the first bishop of West Africa. He is the primate of all Nigeria, of the Church of Nigeria. Samuel Ajayi is actually the best kept secret, and a lot of Egyptologists don't even know anything about him. At the age of 12, Samuel Ajayi's village was raided by slave traders. This was during the Owu War, the Yoruba War, which was between the period of 1821 to 1829. So his entire family were taken as slaves by slave traders, and then they were then resold to Portuguese slave traders. When they were resold, then they were then put on board a ship to be transported to the New World, the Atlantic world, Brazil, America, or Cuba, or wherever they were taking the slaves to at that time. During the same period, the British were enforcing the ban on slave trade. So they had their West African squadron intercept the slave ship. They rescued Samuel Ajayi and some other slaves and took them to Sierra Leone. Rather than take them back to Nigeria, they took them to Sierra Leone. So really, they were not rescued as being reported in journals. Samuel Ajayi Crowther was then adopted by a British English family in Sierra Leone, where he now started learning the English language. He was also enrolled in an Anglican church school. This is where he developed his interest in languages. Once he finished at the Anglican school, he was then initiated into the Masonic Lodge, Freemason. The name Samuel Crowther was actually given to him by those who actually adopted him. He then went to England to train as a minister and was ordained by the Bishop of London. In 1843, Samuel Ajayi was then assigned the Yoruba mission together with his handler called Henry Townsend. So they were assigned the Yoruba mission. Both of them were sent back to Nigeria, where they set up their first missionary. The first missionary was actually set up in Badagry, Lagos. The first Anglican missionary that was set up there in 1843. And with him, Henry Townsend also brought the first Bible into Nigeria in 1843. So the first Bible did not get to Nigeria till 1843. And a copy, one of the copies of the Bible was actually given to the Alake of Egbaland, who was Oba Okukenu at the time. So he got the first copy on behalf of Queen Victoria. It was at this period that Henry Townsend and Samuel Ajayi Crowther started working on the hieroglyphs in secret, because it seems that they'd already discovered that the ancient Egyptian language and the hieroglyphs were Yoruba. So he was then assigned to compile the first Yoruba to English dictionary during this period. And at the same time, he was the first to actually translate the Bible into the Yoruba language. He was the first one to do it. So not only did he have a good knowledge of Yoruba, he also had a good knowledge of Greek and Roman as well. That's how good Samuel Ajayi was at the time. His Yoruba Bible was published in England in 1850, and the compile of his dictionary, which is from Yoruba to English, was published in 1952 in England as well. So his dictionary really is an ancient Egyptian dictionary, because as we find, the hieroglyphs, the ancient Egyptian language and the Yoruba language is exactly the same. Also, Samuel Ajayi Crowther holds a PhD. He actually has a doctorate degree in divine studies. So just imagine, he was one who translated the Bible from Yoruba to English. He was the first one to do it, or from English to Yoruba, sorry. He was the first one to compile the first Yoruba to English dictionary. So he was well versed. He was a very, very intelligent man. He was the one who deciphered the hieroglyph, and this is basically the best kept secret. Remember that we mentioned that Samuel Ajayi Crowther was initiated into the Masonic Freemason order. Just to prove our point, this here is Sir Albert Macaulay. He was born in 1864 and died in 1946. He is the grandson of Samuel Ajayi Crowther. You can see him there on the left hand side, and on the right hand side is the face of Macaulay, the face on a ₦1 Nigerian note. At the time, he was the first person to actually set up a political party, the Nigerian Democratic Party at the time. Also, you can see here the Hepzibah House. It's a Masonic lodge which was actually designed by Albert Macaulay himself and built in 1924. You can see right at the top, you can actually see the Masonic sign right at the top, the Star of David. He was the one who built the Masonic lodge. In the area is actually situated in the Brazilian quarters, Lagos Island at the time. And then if you look at the coins that Nigeria used to use, this is a penny, this is a Nigerian penny in 1959. You can actually see the Masonic sign there. It's got the Star of David. So that goes to show you who was actually running Nigeria at the time. Also, you can see on the left hand side, Iceland Masonic Lodge. You can see there the Masonic sign, the sign of David. And then on the right hand side, this is a Polish Jewish Masonic Lodge as well. And it's quite clear. You can see that star there. It's got exactly the same star. Then we move on to the next picture, you can see a church. You know, above the church also is the Masonic symbol. And then on the right hand side, we have a Durham County Masonic Lodge. And it's quite clear there as well. You can see the Masonic sign, the sign of David. And then here we have the Star of David, the Rothschild, on the left hand side. And then on the right hand side, you can see this is the flag of Israel. This is the national flag of Israel. And it was the Rothschild who actually created the state of Israel in 1948. The Rothschilds are Germans. So you can see the connection there. Again, here you can see the first Bible from Yoruba to English, which was published in 1850 in England. This is a copy of it. And then on the right hand side is the first Yoruba dictionary, published in 1952 in London. So this Yoruba dictionary is almost like an ancient Egyptian dictionary, basically. It's the same. Yoruba and ancient Egypt's language are exactly the same. We actually have a copy of both. So if anybody wants to contact me and they need a copy, I can actually send them a copy. So not only have I got a copy of the actual Bible, first Yoruba Bible itself, printed in 1950, but I also have the dictionary as well, which was published in 1852. This here is Henry Townsend. We've already mentioned him before, the first Anglican missionary to come to Nigeria in 1853. He was born in 1815 and died in 1886. Like we mentioned previously, he was assigned to the Yoruba mission and the handler of Samuel Ajayi Crowther, the first to bring the Bible into Nigeria that year and to set up a missionary in Badagry. On the left hand side, you can actually see a picture of St. Mark's Church of England in Bromley, built in the year 1895 to 1898. And on the right hand side, you can see far left, this is Samuel Ajayi Crowther. This is him. If you zoom in very closely, you can actually see his name at the bottom. And then at the far bottom of the left hand side, this again is Samuel Ajayi Crowther on his mission. It was after the completion of his mission that Samuel Ajayi Crowther was then ordained in 1864. We also find that Samuel Ajayi Crowther was part of those who revised both the Old and the New Testament. The Old Testament came out in 1885 and the New Testament came out in 1881. So he was part of the committee that actually revised the Bible that everybody is using today. He was actually in the committee. Samuel Ajayi died on the 31st of December 1891. So he was the one who deciphered the hieroglyphs 100%. I mean, what's the point having a bachelor's, master's or PhD degree in Egyptology if you cannot critically think? What are the elements of critical thinking? 1, you ask questions. 2, you gather the relevant information. 3, you think through solutions. And 4, you make your conclusion. And then you can also look at alternative points of view as well. Now we give you a few examples of how to actually read the hieroglyph ancient Egyptian style. So we start with the letter B as an example. You can see the representation on the left hand side for Ba. So you can see the bird and then you can see like a sign which looks like an A, and then you can see like a leg. So that sign, that hieroglyph sign is Ba. So Ba means to hoe. It basically means to crop something, to crop or hoe. And it's the same Ba as in the Yoruba language. Exactly the same. Then we go on to number 2, which is Bu. That's the hieroglyph sign for Bu, which is Bu. Bu basically means a location. Bu means a location. In the Yoruba language, Ibu, which means a place or sometimes they use Ibi, which also means a location or place. Then we go on to number 3. You can actually see the hieroglyph sign of like a birth. So it's like a bowl. And then this means B-I, which is kind of like a good deed. But B also means to give birth. So in the Yoruba language, it's exactly the same meaning. B means to give birth. Then hieroglyph number 4, you have Bu, which is Bu. That's the hieroglyph sign of number 4. So Bu means basically to detest someone. In the Yoruba language, Bu also means to abuse. Bu, abuse. Then we have the 5th hieroglyph sign, which shows Busi. That's what the hieroglyph sign shows. So Busi basically means to bless, to Busi, to bless, to initiate something, which is exactly the same meaning in Yoruba language. Then we go on to the hieroglyph sign of M. So number 1, you have like the bird, which means Ama. It means but. Ama means but in ancient Egyptian language. In Yoruba, Ama also means but as well. Then we go on to the 2nd hieroglyph sign. You can actually see the bird, and then you can see like a water sign. So you can see 3 water signs. So that water sign is Mi. So Mi basically means to breathe. And in Yoruba, to breathe, in ancient Egyptian language, also to breathe. It's from that Mi comes Omi, which means water, O-M-I. So number 3, the hieroglyph sign for that is Mo, which is M-O. That means to see or to look. The same thing in Yoruba language as well. Mo means to be aware, to see, to look. It's the same thing, to be aware. Then we have the hieroglyph sign for number 4, which is Mo. I understand. I know something. Mo, which is the same as in the Yoruba language as well. I understand. And then the 5th hieroglyph sign, we have Mi, which means to breathe. The same as in Yoruba. Mi means to breathe. Mo means to know. Then we have the hieroglyph sign for N. In this hieroglyph sign, I really want you to pay attention, because in here we can actually identify some of the pharaoh's name as well. So I want you to really make sure that you concentrate on this sign, because we're going to reflect on it later on when we start to mention the names of the pharaoh. So the first hieroglyph sign is, you can see on the left hand side there's a rabbit, and then at the bottom of the rabbit you can see the water sign. So the rabbit itself on its own is called a horo. That's what a rabbit means. But you see the little water sign, it means Ni, N-I. So Ni basically means to exist. That's what it means. Because we're going to introduce that with Nama, with who they refer to as Nama and who they refer to as Unas. So we're going to introduce those hieroglyph signs in there so you can see where they've actually come from. So Ni means to exist. And in the Yoruba language, Ni also means to exist. Now, you can see the 2nd hieroglyph sign is showing like a pathway. This in ancient Egyptian language is called Ona. That's O-N-A, Ona. In the Yoruba language, it's also called Ona, which means an access. It's an access to a place. And then the 3rd hieroglyph is kind of like a pillar. The sounding for the pillar is Onwo. And then in the Yoruba language, it's also Onwo. So it's the same thing. Then you also have, on the left hand side, you can see here, they have a hieroglyph sign for Wa. So you can see that's the sign, Wa. So Wa basically means come in ancient Egyptian language. And in Yoruba, Wa, which is W-A, also means to come. Then number 5, you can now see a different hieroglyph sign, which means to locate. So wa means to locate in ancient Egyptian language, and in the Yoruba language also means to locate. Wa. Then you have the next hieroglyph sign, which shows OKU. So OKU, Oku, means death, and then Ku means die. You can actually find that in the papyrus. It's there. And then the Yoruba language also have Ku, which means die, and then Oku, which means death. And then the next hieroglyph sign actually has Wi, which is kind of like a mummy case, and it's the same in the Yoruba language. Wi, which means a mummy case. Remember we told you about the word. We showed you the ancient Egyptian hieroglyph and exactly what the word means for wa. Now, the ancient Egyptian word for wa has almost 12 different meanings. This is how deep the ancient Egyptian language and the Yoruba is. For example, we have wa, which means come, seek, and then. Then we have wa, which means hours. Then we now have wa, which means to exist, to dig, to pedal, to drive, to clinch. And then wa, which means suddenly, clearly, profusely. So you can see that not only is it word, Egyptian language and Yoruba doesn't only depend on the word itself, but it also depends on the sound, because it gives different sounds. So you might have one word that could mean 10 different things. Then we move on to the next initial, which is Iri, I-R-I. So you can see on the left-hand side, there's a sign of the eye. So the eye is Iri in ancient Egyptian language, which means eye. In the Yoruba language, it's also Iri or Ri, to see something with your eye. To look with your eye, to see something with your eye, Iri, Ri. That's the hieroglyph sign for it on the left-hand side, number 1 there. The second one, we have Iru, which means kind of like a future. So the second hieroglyph basically is the continuation of the first hieroglyph, which is Iru, Iri, which is the same, Iri, Ri, using your eyes to see, to look, to see. The third hieroglyph, you can actually see the sign of the sun. So that's Ra. So Ra basically means a sun. And then in Yoruba language, Ra also means sunrise. Can you see?
Yeah.
Ra also means to buy in ancient Egyptian language. So when you say Ra, can you help me buy something? Ra, help me buy something. But if you then mention the Ra twice, that means you're swearing to the god Ra that he did not commit any offense. Ra means I did not commit any offense. It's almost as if you're swearing to Ra that you did not do anything wrong. So the fourth hieroglyph sign, you can actually see kind of like a drawing of a mouth, and then you can see a rope going almost to the right. This is Ra. R-O, Ra. So that means to imagine. Ra, to think of something, which is exactly the same thing as in Yoruba language. Ra, Bami Ra, which means to imagine. But Ra also means a mouth as well. So like Oro. So Ra means the mouth in ancient Egyptian language, and in Yoruba it also means Ra. R-O, to give a sound, or Ra. So it's exactly the same thing. For those who are watching our video, honestly, the ancient Egyptian language and the Yoruba language is exactly the same. Here again, we have an example of over 100 words. So you can see that matches with Yoruba and the ancient Egyptian language. We're just going to go through a few. Wu means rise in ancient Egyptian language, which is exactly the same in Yoruba. Osa, which is actually Osiris or Osiri, is the father of the gods, and is exactly the same in Yoruba language. Osa. Ere, which is E-R-E, means a python or a serpent, which is exactly the same in the Yoruba language. Then Orisi, a great god, exactly the same in Yoruba language. Sin, which is S-E-N, is to actual worship. When you say sin, is to worship. Sin means to worship, and it's exactly the same. Now, the sixth one, Ogede or Egede, it means to chant. You're chanting, so it's exactly the same as in ancient Egyptian language and Yoruba. Then we have the word ta, which is Ta, which means to sell or to offer. It's exactly the same as in the Yoruba language. Then we have Suegbe. Suegbe basically means your food in ancient Egyptian language, and it's exactly the same as in Yoruba. Then we even have Eru. E-R-U, Eru, means you're afraid, you're terrified, which is exactly the same in ancient Egyptian language. And then we also have Odun, O-D-O-N, Odun, which exactly matches Yoruba. So you can see various examples. For example, be, to become, which is exactly the same as in ancient Egyptian language. Dudu, black image of Osiris, which is exactly the same. So if you got time, you can pause and just compare both words. I mean, there's just list after comparison between the ancient Egyptian language and the Yoruba language. Another example is mu, which means to drink. Mu or mi is exactly the same word. And then you can see here, finally, we have okunkun, which means darkness, and is exactly the same as in Yoruba. Yoruba and ancient Egyptian language have okunkun, and it's exactly the same thing. We even have here, number 99, we have Anubis, which is the deity for giving birth, and is exactly the same as in ancient Egyptian language and Yoruba. This is a book written by Abubakar Musa Lam. He was a professor of Egyptology at the school of Cheikh and Diop. He's kind of like a student of Cheikh and Diop, and it was Diop actually who helped him supervise his book. And in that book, if you want to go and buy it, it details almost the same example that I've actually given in this video. And he's a professor of Egyptology, so we definitely know what we're talking about in this video. So if you want to buy the book, you can go and buy it. There's a lot of information there for you. It was actually written in 1993. Now that we've gone through the actual hieroglyphs itself, and we've given you examples and words which match between the ancient Egyptian language and the Yoruba language, we're now going to revisit the first 6 pharaohs of the first dynasty of Egypt. Now also I'd like to mention the name Horus, as Egyptologists have been using, that there's a Horus father, there's a Horus son, Horus junior, Horus senior, or the name of a pharaoh, Horus name of a pharaoh. That is an Egyptologist's invention. There is no such thing. The only pharaoh that existed whose name is Horus is the 5th pharaoh of the first dynasty of Egypt, and we're going to go through him again. His actual name is Olorun, but we're going to go through that. So just to clarify, there is no Egyptian pharaoh with a Horus name. Horus is a brand new title, because you cannot have Olorun for every pharaoh in the dynasty, because he is the supreme deity. So each pharaoh cannot become a supreme deity. There's only one pharaoh who has that title, and he's the 5th pharaoh of of the first dynasty of Egypt. So I just want to clarify that before we go into the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth pharaohs of the first dynasty of Egypt. Now, this is the first pharaoh of the first dynasty of Egypt. His name is Pharaoh Meni or Bokun. He is the first pharaoh or king of the first dynasty of Egypt. His reign is between 3150 BC to 3090 BC. For those who don't understand the difference between BC and AD, with BC we count downwards. The years is exactly the same, but we're counting downwards. This was an Anglo-Saxon invention. AD we count upwards. On the right hand side you can see him clearly. This is Meni, as spelled M-E-N-I. That's him. That is exactly him. That's exactly how he looks like. That is the first pharaoh of the first dynasty of Egypt. And you can also see him wearing his crown. You can see him quite clearly. He's black, he's Yoruba. We have not used any computer generated software. Is there for everybody to see. In this section, you can see him wearing his crown on the left hand side. And then on the right hand side, you can also see him clearly. So that's him. We just wanted to show you his picture again. In this section, you can actually see on the left hand side is a baboon. That is the deity. That is his deity. Now, in the ancient Egyptian language, the baboon is called Obo. So this is where the name Obo actually comes from. So from Obo, we then have another deity of his, which is Obokun, which means a catfish. So his name is really Okun, but it includes Obo, which is his deity, which is the baboon. So it becomes Obokun, which is also a catfish in ancient Egyptian language. He is known as Nama, but we reject this absolutely. His name is not Nama, because on the right hand side we have his cartouche. If you look at the middle of the cartouche, you actually see that kind of water sign which we mentioned previously when we were talking about hieroglyphs and the meaning of hieroglyphs. In the middle, that water sign is Ni, which means to exist. So the cartouche of the first pharaoh of the first dynasty of Egypt reads Meni, which is M-E-N-I, which means a man in ancient Egyptian language. Now, from the word Meni comes the word Eni, which means a person in ancient Egyptian language. Now, from the word Eni comes Emini, which means I am the one in ancient Egyptian language. Now, from Emini comes Ami, which means the hidden one in ancient Egyptian language. So Pharaoh Meni is actually the first Ami, and it's not Amun like they've been making you believe. It's actually Ami, which is pronounced in English Amun. Then you can see, as we mentioned previously, Obo, which means a baboon in ancient Egyptian language, and then Obokun, which means a catfish in ancient Egyptian language. Now, Okun means strength, ability, and power in ancient Egyptian language. Then Okun, can you see how it sounds? That means sea or salt water. Then Okun, almost like to pull, means a cord or rope. So really his surname is Okun. That's his surname. So it's Meni Okun with Obo and Obokun as his deity. Then the second pharaoh of the first dynasty of Egypt, his name is Teti Aha Okun, because now we know what their surname is. Their surname is O-K-U-N, which means Okun, strength, ability. He reigned in the year 3090 BC to 3035 BC. On the right hand side, you can see him there just holding like kind of like a calabash in it. That calabash is called Aha. In the next section, you can also see him. On the left hand side, Aha basically means a small calabash in ancient Egyptian language. And then on the right hand side, you can see the calabash as well. So here we have Aha, which means a small calabash used to give children water in ancient Egyptian language. Then within Aha, we have Ha. Ha, which means to scratch, to brush, to scrape in ancient Egyptian language. Then we have Ha, kind of like you're amazed or astonished in ancient Egyptian language. Then we have the expression Ha, which means you're kind of surprised. And his name, his cartouche name, you can see his cartouche on the right hand side. So his cartouche name is Teti. Te, which means Te, means to adore in ancient Egyptian language, and Ti means to perform, to support, to push, to close, etc. With his surname being Okun, which is strength, ability and power in ancient Egyptian language. So his full name is Teti Aha Okun. That's his name, and that's his hieroglyph on the right hand side. And also, Egyptologists may try to confuse you that Mene, who is the first dynasty of Egypt, the first pharaoh of the first dynasty of Egypt, and Teti are the same person. They're not the same person, and we're going to tell you why. You can see it quite clearly in the Abydos King list. This is the first 6 hieroglyphs in the Abydos King list. Second in the row is the cartouche name Teti. Now, he's not the only pharaoh who actually has that same name and that same cartouche. Because if you look at the next section, on the left hand side is Pharaoh Teti, who is the second pharaoh of the first dynasty of Egypt. He's on the second row on the Abydos King list. His year of reign was 3090 BC. We also have 2 additional pharaohs who have exactly the same hieroglyph and exactly the same name. So the 4th pharaoh or king of the 3rd dynasty of Egypt, he's also known as Teti as well. And he's on the 17th row on the Abydos King list. He reigned in the year 2670 BC. You can clearly see that his cartouche is the same as number 2. And then also we have an additional pharaoh, also called Teti as well. He's the first king of the 6th dynasty of Egypt, and he's on the 34th row on the Abydos King list. He reigned between the year 2315 BC to 2294 BC. You can see it quite clearly. So we have 3 pharaohs with the same hieroglyph and the same name, and they're all Yoruba, as you can see here, Teti. And in the next section, you can see the hieroglyph. Remember when we went through how to read the hieroglyph? You can actually see the sign of the rabbit at the top. And then you can see also the water sign, which means Ni, to exist. So the 33rd on the list, on the Abydos King list, is actually the father of Teti or Teti. You can see him here on the 34th row, and his father, number 33. He is the 9th king of the 5th dynasty of Egypt. He's actually the last. He was the last pharaoh of that dynasty, of the 5th dynasty of Egypt. And he's known as Unas. That is not his name, because that's not what the cartouche reads. The cartouche actually reads Oni, which means Ni. It's a title of a pharaoh, or Oni, which means today. So he is the father of Teti, and he reigned in the year 2345 BC to 2315 BC. So his name is not Unas. His name is Oni, with Ni in the middle of his name, which is the water sign. And also he's known as Ehoro, so you can see the rabbit, which is facing the left-hand side. Ehoro basically means a rabbit in ancient Egyptian language. So you can see it's there for everybody to see. Also, you can see an ancient Egyptian Yoruba king. He is known as King Olokun. Can you see where the name Okun actually comes from? And he is the Oni of Ife, which is the head of the Yoruba Obas. So Oba in ancient Egyptian language also means a king in ancient Egyptian language, and Oni also means the title of a king. So you can see where the name Oni comes from, because Oni also is the ninth pharaoh of the 5th dynasty of Egypt as well. So you can see the connection. Also, when you actually Google the name Oni, in fact, sometimes you can't even find it because it's now been spelled O-N-I. But the actual correct spelling should have been O-N-I. So you could even see what's been happening, that even YouTube, Google are currently rewriting history, because we have the dictionary from 1952, which also shows that the correct spelling is O-N-I, which is Oni. But currently, if you go into YouTube, it's been spelled O-O-N-I. So that's basically to confuse you. It's the same as what they've done with Amin, Emini, or Ami. Now they want to start translating it to Amun. It's not Amun, it's actually Amin or Amen. So it's actually Amen and not Amun, like they're trying to confuse you. Then we also have the letters that they're now trying to say it's Re or R-E, but it's actually, the word is Ra, because we have the translation is Ra, R-A. It's not Re, but Ra. Then we also have a word like Aten. Aten. Remember, it's a place. But Egyptologists, to try and confuse you, are now calling it Aten, which is A-T-E-N. So they're beginning to add certain words to try and throw people, of course. But actually, Aten does not exist. A-T-E-N does not exist. The correct pronunciation is Aton, which is A-T-O-N. And the correct pronunciation for Ra is R-A, not R-E. And the correct pronunciation for Ami or Amen is A-M-E-N, or not A-M-U-N, because Amun does not exist. Because they want to make you differentiate between Amen and Amun. But Amen and Amin are the same person. It's the same meaning.